Hello, Star Trek fans, and welcome to Star Trek Prodigy, a RebingeIt podcast. My name is James.
And my name is Kim, and we're watching Star Trek Prodigy and talking about it here on the Talk Through Media network of podcasts. Hit it! Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are on Season 1, Episode 7, First Con-tact. This episode began streaming January 13th, 2022. Let's get a little housekeeping out of the way. You can subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts under Star Trek Prodigy, a RebingeIt podcast.
Or we are also available through Talk Through Media on their all-inclusive feed, the Star Trek Picardcast feed, and the Discovery podcast feed.
We're all over the Star Treks.
Yes.
Let's get down to this episode. Just like before, we're going to walk through it to discuss what we think about today's plot. Then we'll read out some feedback we got, and we'll play a clip from our kid correspondent, Mahi. Let's just say Ferengi, not Mahi's thing.
She came to that conclusion without any influence from you, Kim.
I said absolutely nothing, but Mahi and I are on the same get rid of the Ferengi bus. Okay, let's get started. We have a cold open.
The first one of the series.
Dal is recording a captain's log, so Star Trek all of a sudden.
Yep.
And he's talking about what happened to the last crew, and he does not sound quite as cocky as he has previously.
Well, we see the inside of the protostar, and it looks a little trashed. It appears to be all the mess created by this lot, and they are messy people.
Yeah, the first time we watched it, we thought, since he's flashing back essentially and talking about the previous crew, this must have been what happened when they had to abandon ship. But no, it seems like this crew is just a bunch of pigs.
Well, Jankum is a Tellaride, and that looks a little bit piggy.
I love Jacob. He's my favorite. But he probably is a messy eater.
The holo recording of Chakotay is playing and saying, "Mayday, Mayday," but it's not complete, and it cuts out just before you see who boarded the ship.
I went back and watch the end of last week's episode again because Chakotay says it's hard to hear because the current Janeway hologram kind of talks over him.
Yeah.
And he says something about an anomaly. And I saw some people on Twitter saying, he says temporal anomaly. It's a time travel episode. But I can't hear him say temporal. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure if people are just reaching there.
It might be.
Yeah, but we don't hear anything different here.
But from past history, the best kind of anomalies usually are temporal ones.
We do see a very stern Janeway as Dal continues his captain's log, and he tells us that she's the most frustrated of all of them.
Yeah, that's a very stern look.
And the big reveal for this week is the crew has discovered a new toy. There is a transporter on board.
Finally!
And they're testing it by beaming a piece of hot pie all around the ship. And Jankum gives some quick exposition of what the transporter is, how it turns things into energy and then back. And then Dal says, we need a living volunteer. And he looks at Jankum.
Yeah, I like how he turns to Jankum to be the test subject.
Yeah, and smartly, Rock Talk suggests maybe we should use Murph because he is kind of indestructible, as we learned last week. And then she feeds Murph a comm badge so that they can track him, and you can kind of see it through the purple outside shell of Murph.
Yeah. So they put Murph on the transporter pad, and Jankum, in another classic nod to Star Trek, powers it up and says, "Energize," and Murph is beamed to the bridge.
Well, they think he's beamed to the bridge because they all rush there and they find that Jankum's targeting skills may be a little off, and Murph is actually on the outside of the ship and he's sliding down the viewing glass or the outside window, whatever that is.
I think it's transparent aluminum.
Oh, sure. And then we go into the opening credits.
This is a textbook Star Trek opening.
Yeah.
Did you get the reference to floor pie?
Yeah, so Jankum's got all the best lines, and when they beam the pie somewhere, he says, floor pie, before Gwen picks it up and eats it, and I'm pretty sure that's a Simpsons reference.
It is absolutely a Simpsons reference.
I wonder if The Simpsons is still airing.
It'll be like its 300th season or something, maybe?
Yeah, no problem.
Well, Murph did not seem to suffer any distress from having been beamed outside of the ship, as while he's sliding down the screen, he has a giant grin on his face.
Yeah, and you can see his comm badge.
Yes.
As he slides. I don't know, that was very cute.
He is pretty indestructible. And before we move on, I think I figured out what it is with the credits.
It wouldn't be our podcast if we didn't stop and talk about the credits.
Well, yeah. It's the music. It sounds like a Marvel superhero movie with a Star Trek ending.
Yeah, I can see that.
So, into the episode. Well, they beam Murph back, and he doesn't seem to be any worse for wear. Then Janeway calls them to the bridge. They have an incoming distress call.
On the view screen, we see a hooded figure, and she's asking for transport. She says her ship has a compromised warp core, and she has sick orphans on board. And Rocktalk says, oh no, we need to help her. Dal gets this sort of look of recognition on his face, and then he asks if the orphans also have the phage. And this alien that we can't quite see is like, well, yeah, they do. And then she pulls back her hood, revealing she's a Ferengi.
At this point, if they'd had any sense, they should have said, open fire, all weapons. This is just good practice when you run across a Ferengi. It would benefit the whole sector, trust me.
Or just run away. Don't interact. Don't engage.
This also appears to be a female, as the Ferengi pronounce it. Why is she not on Ferenginar? And where is Pell?
Yeah, I think we're talking about a female Ferengi in the Gamma Quadrant.
Yeah.
And it's strange enough that there's a female Ferengi out on her own, but the fact that she's in the Gamma Quadrant kind of refers back to Pell from Deep Space Nine. One of the earlier episodes, there was a female Ferengi who posed as a male, and in the end, she escaped going to jail by going to the Gamma Quadrant.
Yeah, if you know about the Ferengi through Deep Space Nine, where they were really expanded upon, their society is a little sexist.
A little sexist. Oh, wow. I don't even know how to respond to that. They are as sexist as they could possibly be. It's one of the things that infuriates me when we watch Deep Space Nine, is how the Ferengi females are treated. They are not allowed to leave the planet. They're supposed to stay on Ferenginar all the time, so they're not allowed to leave and go anywhere else. They're not allowed to talk to people outside of their family. They're not allowed to own property or have money or have jobs. And oh, by the way, they can't wear clothes. Because here, this character is wearing clothes. So all good. And she's on her own. And she's just as scummy as any other Ferengi. So she just fits right in with everybody else in her species. Well, she also recognizes Dal, and we get a huge reveal about Dal's backstory. This is Damon Nandi, the captain who raised Dal. Wow, that was a surprise. And suddenly, this explains so much about him.
Yes, that's for sure.
And when we learn this, Jankum says, I don't see any resemblance. Like she's Dal's mom.
So on brand for Jankum.
Oh, Jankum.
So on brand.
You're the best.
We now see a classic-looking Ferengi ship called the Damsel, and the crew beam over.
Everyone checks their body parts after transport because it's the first time they've been through the transporter. That was kind of cute.
Yeah. Did you notice the orange stripe color scheme around all those crates? I'm pretty sure she stole these from Rebels on Tatooine.
Oh, okay. Back to Star Wars.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Nandi introduces herself and says she missed Dal and searched for him for, pause, years.
Yeah. Something suspicious there.
Yeah. Another thing about the Ferengi, they are terrible at lying.
And they do it all the time, so you think they'd be good at it.
Yeah. And she says how much she missed him.
Yeah.
Looking at the protostar, she asks if he joined the Federation. So she clearly knows enough about the Alpha Quadrant to know who the Federation are and what their ships look like.
Well, the Ferengi are Alpha Quadrant aliens, so it makes sense. I imagine they finally all got kicked out of the Alpha Quadrant because they ripped everybody off there and got booted.
That would make sense.
They go to visit Dal's old room, and it's under the engines, like Harry Potter living under the stairs. There's also just that poor orphan thing going on. I mean, he could break into song at any moment. And they all squeeze through this tiny door to go, I don't know, under the engine somehow.
Yeah.
And Rocktalk, she could only get her head through, but somehow later she manages to have her whole body in there. I don't know how she got through that tiny doorway.
I think she can be quite squeezy when she wants to be.
Like maybe she can rearrange the rocks.
Yeah, exactly.
Change her shape.
In the engine room, Jankum finds an interesting-looking contraption, and Gwyn translates the writing, which is Klingon. It's a cloaking device. Nandi says she needs chimerium to make it work, and Rocktalk lets it out the bag that they have loads of it. Jankum doesn't help here by agreeing with Rocktalk, all the while Dal basically doing a cut sign to try and stop them from talking.
Like, don't admit that we have it.
Yeah. Dal says to Nandi, we should talk.
Yeah, and then later when they're alone, she asks about the chimerium, and Dal quotes Ferengi Rule of Acquisition 208. The only thing more dangerous than a question is an answer. You always got to get these stupid rules when you're talking about Ferengi.
Oh, yeah.
Then she tells Dal that she'll trade the cloaking device for a favor. She needs them to get a crystal from an alien planet, which apparently hasn't yet made first contact. She's offering a trade, a Ferengi spit pan for the crystal. She tells Dal that she needs the crystal because she owes a lot of gambling debts, and she acts really desperate here, and Dal seems to respond to it and feel bad for her.
This also follows a Deep Space Nine tradition in that, despite a few exceptions, most Ferengi are the worst business people in the galaxy.
Yeah.
So it's completely believable she's ended up massively in debt.
Totally.
Back on the Protostar, Dal is attempting to convince the others to go through with the plan, calling it a diplomatic exchange. And an even more stern-looking Janeway tells him that they need to have a very serious conversation about first contact. We get some more exposition of Star Trek lore here and the Prime Directive. I guess for anybody who isn't familiar with the series, they wouldn't know what that is. But basically, she explains how you should not interfere with the evolution of other intelligent species.
Right. Unless we really like them or we're in the mirror universe.
Yeah, that's true. There are a few exceptions. Well, there's a lot of exceptions, let's be honest.
Yeah, that's what we've learned in watching Deep Space Nine. If we actually like you, those rules don't really matter.
Yeah.
It's just a guideline.
Well, actually, she says here it is the highest priority guideline.
Yeah, she doesn't say it's a law.
So, with some justification, you can say, yeah, we ignored the guideline.
That's true. She should have just pulled out a copy of First Contact and had the crew watch it.
Oh.
It's not without precedent to air parts of old episodes during newer episodes.
Well, plus it's just a good movie, so totally worth a watch.
Yeah. Janeway disappears at the end of the scene. She doesn't seem very happy that they're not taking this as seriously as they should be. She kind of leaves in a huff. You know, it was a holographic equivalent of a door slam.
Zero says that they are detecting Dal's thoughts are conflicted, that he questions Nandi's motives. He very unconvincingly says, I trust her. She's a friend.
No, she's a Ferengi. You can't trust them. And it seems like he should know that, you know, having been raised by her.
Yep, right. If he spent that much time with her, he must have seen how many times she ripped people off or did bad deals or just lied.
Yeah. Well, after the ad break, we now arrive at the planet, which appears to be a sandy desert, so we've gone back to Tatooine.
That's where Nandi stole those supply crates from.
Oh, maybe. Okay.
Yep, from the rebels.
After they land, they cannot communicate with the life forms, which Zero says are all around them, even though they can't see them. And then a huge sand wall starts to enclose them, and Zero says that they're angry, but they can't determine why. They're all kind of freaking out, and you hear Zero say, it's Murder Planet all over again.
Yes. Well, now they're enclosed inside a sand dome, and Nandi pulls out a classic Klingon phaser.
Yeah.
Gwyn tells them to look submissive and show that they're not a threat. She eventually figures out that they're using harmonics to communicate and makes all the others change their tricorders. Then the sandstorm subsides. Then a giant structure rises from the sand and they all enter it.
We really need to learn some caution. Yet again, it feels like the entire planet wants to kill us, but oh yeah, let's go in that structure that it just put up for us. No big deal.
See, they're already Starfleet. We don't know anything about it. This could be dangerous. Let's just go in there.
The entire crew.
Yeah.
Well, back on the ship, Janeway is watching the holo recording obsessively, and at the moment that the bridge doors open, she zooms in on the paused image to reveal what looks like Darth Dreadnought behind the door, and she asks, who are you?
So she doesn't know or remember who Dreadnought is. So was he the one who boarded the ship and erased her memory?
It's possible, but this also might not be Dreadnought. It could be a cousin, brother, clone. Lots of bad robots with red eyes. I thought it was very convenient that she didn't think to magnify that spot on the image until everybody left the ship.
Yeah.
Because they would have recognized if it was actually Dreadnought.
That would have been a good idea when they get back, show them the image and go, any of you guys know who this is?
Yeah, have you seen this guy before?
Yeah. Back on the planet, Gwyn tells them that the structure is created by somatic transmutation. And we also have some classic Star Trek technobabble.
Yes.
Rocktalk suggests calling them the Samari. Nandi is still very focused on getting this crystal. The crew end up sliding down tubes into a chamber filled with crystals hanging from the ceiling, from what looked like vines. See, it might be Murder Planet after all.
It might be Murder Planet.
Anyway, the crystals start to glow and resonate and play tones. Nandi calls them Remolite crystals. Rocktalk is very much in awe of this sight and calls them beautiful.
At least she didn't try to name them Larry, like she did Murder Planet.
Yeah, Larry the Murder Planet.
Well, at this point, several floating, glowing aliens appear, and I had a very close encounters of the third kind feeling.
Yeah.
Not only were they trying to communicate through sounds and music, which is what happened in that movie, but also that just sort of floaty, we don't get really close-up good looks at them, at least not right away. It was just very close encounters.
That's interesting because I got a very much the Abyss vibe from them. You know, the underwater creatures.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I can see that. Zero explains that each crystal is emitting a unique frequency and that this is how they achieve harmonic resonance. Gwen says this controls their power, and she says every crystal matters, which I'm not sure how she knows that, but okay, that tells us that each crystal is important and we can't just steal one.
Yeah.
And Dal, at this point, sort of quietly says, we shouldn't be here, which was a very interesting moment for Dal.
Yeah. Nandi gives them the useless metal plate, definitely selling the sizzle, another Ferengi rule.
Yes.
And says they should give them a gift in return. The aliens start playing music to the crew through the crystals, and they're all impressed, even Jankum, who wipes a tear from his eye.
Oh.
While pretending not to like it.
Yes.
All except Nandi, who says she wants a crystal and then runs over and grabs a low-hanging one. The music immediately stops, and Zero says it's causing the aliens pain. But Nandi isn't taking any of it, and she just starts grabbing more of them. Dal is annoyed and says, this isn't what we agreed to. Gwyn tells him, this was supposed to be a diplomatic exchange, and Rockdock asks, did you lie to us?
Duh.
Nandi quotes Rule of Acquisition 21, never place friendship above profit, and pushes Dal away.
Oh, these Ferengi are such jerks.
Oh, completely. The floor is shaking and she drops the crystals. Zero says these don't belong to her, and she takes out the phaser and shoots at them all. While they're distracted, she grabs a single crystal and runs up the tube they came down.
Then Dal steps up and tells the others that they've got to get those crystals back, and they all start putting them back into the hanging vines. But Gwen tells them Nandi has the last crystal. Rocktuck is shouting that, we're sorry!
Yeah.
And they all rush to escape as things are kind of collapsing around them, and Dal follows Nandi. On the surface, Dal tackles Nandi, telling her the crystal doesn't belong to her, and she quotes another rule of acquisition. This time it's number 1. Once you have their money, you never give it back.
Well, strictly speaking, that rule doesn't really apply here because she stole it. There must be a better rule in there somewhere, like, once you've robbed them, don't give it back, unless you're caught and a plea deal can be arranged.
I think that's implied, that the stolen part of it is the same as they give it to you. Because she uses that again later about something else. Oh, your shields are down, so I just took it. I thought it was a gift.
The Ferengi definition of theft is not the same.
Oh, the Ferengi are a nightmare.
Yeah.
Well, Nandi calls Dal soft and says that not even working the mines hardened him up. And we learn that Dal wasn't actually kidnapped, as he believes, and that Nandi actually sold him in order to buy a new partner, Pickpox, which is a floating square cube that we've seen on her ship. We don't exactly know what Pickpox can do yet, but it does seem to be some kind of a sentient creature.
Yeah. So she sold him.
Yeah.
Nice.
Talking of her ship, it now decloaks over them, and she tells Dal that she stole their chimerium when their shields were down. She considers it a gift because their shields were down, and she takes off. She tells him he shouldn't be mad. He should be taking notes. And then she says, we'll cross paths again one day, and she leaves. Dal says to the aliens, well, he really just sort of says it to the air, that he's sorry. And then Jankum, much to Dal's surprise, beams him out successfully just before a bunch of dust sort of comes down on him.
Jankum says, you didn't have your comm badge, so I had to lock onto you manually. Dal tells him, I didn't lose it. He put the badge on the crystal.
Yeah, because Jankum says, you lost your badge, dum-dum.
On Nandi's ship, she's kind of gloating, and she puts the crystal down, and they lock onto it, and then beam it back to the planet, and back into its hanging vine holder.
More vines. It's a really nice touch here when they beam the crystal back and you see it attached to the vine. You also see the comm badge. You see the Starfleet logo sort of spinning with it. Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Although, do you think that might cause a problem with this species' evolutionary path because they actually now have a Starfleet comm badge?
My guess is they're just going to flick it off of there because it probably is messing with the sound that comes out of that crystal.
It's affecting the resonance.
Exactly.
Back on the bridge, and they're all agreeing how close a call that was. Rocktalk says, at least they fixed everything.
Yeah. Did they?
But hologram Janeway gives them a dressing down, telling them that they have done irreparable harm to that species. She tells them they did not go in with good intentions. You acted for yourself. You broke the Prime Directive and the trust of this new species, and also her trust.
Rogtalk is like, I don't like being in trouble.
Yeah. Dal, surprisingly, actually takes responsibility here, saying, I messed up. And he asks how Nandi could do that to him. He was like a son to her. And Gwyn replies, and I was my father's daughter, but here we are. Technically, she's a clone, but I get the sentiment.
Well, she might not know that she's a clone.
Oh, that's going to be another shock for her.
Probably.
She just keeps on getting good news, doesn't she?
Oh, yeah. This Janeway scene here, I mean, she covered everything.
Oh, absolutely.
She's like, you guys lied. You went in with bad intentions. This is not the Starfleet way. Not only did you break the Prime Directive, but you were lying about stuff. So now you've lost my trust.
Yeah.
And they do not feel good about it. And they shouldn't, because it was pretty bad. Really, it was Dal in this case. They all followed Dal in.
Yeah.
But still, it was definitely a bad thing, and they should have thought a little bit more about it. Well, they should have listened to her, right? She told them.
Yeah, well, they didn't really get how important a first contact is.
Well, hopefully they learned quite a bit from this, because they were also moved by the species.
Yeah. Well, Dal, there's a change here for starters. He didn't try and deflect blame. He didn't claim it was somebody else's fault, or it was the stars, or something else. He took responsibility and said, I messed up.
That was a shocker.
Yes.
This was a very different Dal, which we're going to talk about.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm going to disagree a little bit with Janeway here.
How dare you?
She says how it will irrevocably damage these aliens. I don't think so. The aliens here have learned some very important lessons. The first one is the importance of having redundant systems and backups, and maybe an off-site colo that they can fail over to if somebody steals one of the crystals.
That is an important lesson to learn. So yes, maybe they have gained something, but I don't think she's wrong that they have also learned maybe not to trust anybody who comes to the planet. Although that's maybe good advice.
Well, yeah. And, you know, thinking about that, also maybe don't let people that you don't know into your crystal sanctuary, your most important part of your planet.
Yeah, it's a terrible idea.
Yeah, don't let people into your sacred crystal chamber.
Yeah, they let the strangers get too close to the valuable stuff right away.
Yeah.
Well, at this point, Gwen tells Dal that at least you've learned who your true friends are. And she also says how she wishes that she could tell him it'll stop hurting, but she doesn't know that yet.
Ow.
Back on Nandi's ship, the box, that pickpox, tells her that there is a reward for information on the protostar, and she tells it, open a channel to the Rev 12. I want to speak to this diviner. Uh-oh.
And this is how we get the diviner back in the show.
But they are 4,000 light years away, so I'm not sure. I guess they could have thugs in the neighborhood.
True. Plus, the other thing is, as it's a Ferengi, you know that's going to be a collect call back to the Rev 12.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. She's not putting her quarters in that machine.
Yeah.
Well, the end. A lot happened in that episode. Was there anything that stood out?
Anything that stood out? Well, we have the transporter.
That was exciting. We've been talking about that transporter for a long time, so it's nice to know that it's there.
Yes. The Energize from the classic Trek transporter lingo.
Well, there was a lot of exposition about how the transporter worked, and then there was a lot of exposition from Janeway about the Prime Directive, and then also the speech that she gave about this isn't very Starfleet, what you did. So yeah, there was a lot of that for sure.
Oh yeah, definitely for an audience who hasn't seen this before, or if this is their first introduction to Star Trek, it's really bringing out the lore piece by piece.
Yeah, right.
I like it. It's such a good idea. You're not sort of dropping it all in one go. You're building upon these foundations.
And mostly we've been building on the positives in Star Trek.
Yes.
But this time we had a Ferengi, which is a bad guy from Star Trek.
Right. This is the first true Star Trek villain we've seen.
Right.
Please let's have the Borg.
Oh, there's so many villains.
Oh.
I'm still worried about the Jem'Hadar, so let's see what happens.
Oh, the Jem'Hadar would be something.
Another thing that stood out is it looked like when Janeway was enhancing that image, it looked like that was Dreadnought who was boarding. And that was the implication in the last episode, although we didn't see it.
Yeah.
So I think we're supposed to believe that's Dreadnought, but again, it could have been any robot with red eyes.
Well, there could be a whole army of Dreadnoughts, and he's just one of them.
Yes, right. Because we talked about him actually just being a consulting employee, so there could be a whole bunch of those consultants.
Ah, yes.
We had the floor pie. That was that was very funny.
Oh, yes. Simpsons reference.
There wasn't enough Jankum this week. I mean, he had a couple of very funny lines, like when he said he didn't see the resemblance between the purple Dal and the Ferengi. And then he had the floor pie line. But otherwise, he didn't have enough to say.
Yeah, normally he is the fountain of funny statements. But
yeah, he was quiet.
Something I'll bring up here is that you won't have seen this, Kim, but in the future, there is another Nagus who attempts to change Ferengi society for the better. However, not every Ferengi is going to follow that ruling or returning to new values. You know there's going to be Ferengi who will stick with the traditional values. Perhaps Nandi is a weird mix of she's embracing newer values and the old ways of profit and commerce.
So frequently in Star Trek, when things happen, you're supposed to believe that whatever that thing is true for the entire planet, the entire species.
Oh,
suddenly
that's true.
Is that way.
Yeah.
It certainly happens with the religious stuff to Bajor, where all of a sudden the entire planet is X. And so, yeah, there are going to be factions. There's going to be differences. Though, I don't know what's going on with the Naguses in the future, but if it's anybody other than Pel, then it's not a win.
Yeah, I love Pel too.
This might be too much Deep Space Nine talk for this show.
Can you have too much Deep Space Nine talk?
I think you can.
Okay.
Anything else stand out for you?
No, that wraps it up for me.
Then let's move on to character development. What did we learn this episode?
Dal raised by Ferengi. That explains so much about his view of life.
Yeah, maybe a little surprising that he didn't expect a con from his so-called mom.
That is very true.
Yeah.
I mean, knowing what the Ferengi are like, you must have seen that time and time again. I mean, she couldn't have hidden it from him.
No, she couldn't have. This is too where I wondered, it seemed like Dal was becoming a little bit more of a believer.
Yeah.
And taking responsibility for himself. And then as soon as he did, something very bad happened to him. So I wondered if he was going to slide back from that. And I guess we'll see in the next episode.
True. But we got the impression that it really made him feel bad, that he felt guilt over this and he felt remorse.
True. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's not a very Ferengi thing for a start.
But he might go back to his captain's quarters that he's squatting in and just be like, see, I knew it. I should have just kept my guard up.
Yeah, hopefully the opposite is true. And this is I should be open, not just with the crew. He should be open with his friends and colleagues and the people who have his back.
Right. What about Gwen?
This is the second time now that we've seen Gwyn having real empathy for someone on the crew. We saw Zero last week, and this week we're seeing she understood Dal's plight.
Yep, she did.
She's basically come from the same place he's at now.
Well, now she just needs to feel bad about that Cation she left behind. Hashtag save the Cation.
Oh, yeah.
You got to go back for that cat.
You got to go back for the cat.
Not even mentioning it. It's starting to freak me out. We better save that cat.
Yeah.
And we also didn't talk about the Protostar engine and whether or not it's recharged.
Yeah, I think because they were so focused on the cloaking device.
I guess so, yeah. Well, the other thing is hologram Janeway. She gave them a real talking to. She means business. Plus, she's also quite frustrated by having her memory erased, so she's a little bit testy in this episode.
Oh, yeah. This episode was stern Janeway the whole way through.
Yeah.
I haven't seen Janeway this annoyed since a Voyager episode. Usually ones involving 7 of 9, where she would get annoyed at things.
No, usually Neelix.
Oh, she got really annoyed at 7 of 9 a few times.
Well, sure. She was a Borg. There wasn't a lot of time spent on any of the other characters. Rock Talk was her usual childlike self.
Yes.
But really nothing new there. I think we were trying to take a big step with Dal, and we did it by last week having him go through hundreds of iterations of the Kobayashi Maru and then have Spock telling him, or at least convincing him, that you have to care about the crew and you have to put the lives of the other people ahead of your own. And that seemed to kind of stick with him.
Yeah.
And then when we had that other big character development with Gwen, when she finally realized, wait a minute, my father is not what I think he is.
Yeah.
And then that was also the big move for her. We haven't really had any big moves with anybody else yet. Maybe a little bit with Hologram Janeway, but not with anyone else yet. Like, certainly not with Zero. I would imagine that there's more to come yet with Zero. But I feel like Jankum is fully developed. He is what he is.
Yeah, I think you might see some more humor with Jankum, but...
Yeah, I don't think he's going to grow.
I think another thing with Dal is maybe this is a realization that he can't go back to the world that he had.
Ah, yes.
Maybe he had a hope that, because he thought he was kidnapped, that he could go back to that life. That life is gone. So again, that's another kind of parallel with Gwyn.
Yeah.
Gwyn's old life is gone and she has to move on. And now Dal is exactly in that spot. These are the people he's going to have to rely on. There isn't that home he can go back to.
Right, because neither one of them had a home that was what they thought it was.
Right.
Yeah. So if he looks at it that way, he lost the thing that he thought was right before.
Right.
That was the thing that didn't exist. This thing that he has now, this is real. The entire crew follows him anywhere, and Gwen kind of alluded to that. They'll do whatever he says, even if they think it's crazy or stupid. They just go, well, here we go. We're going on this mission, and off they go.
This is a found family.
This is a found family. That's a good way to look at it. So while I was a little concerned when we got to the end of the episode that he was going to revert, I think if he looks deeply enough, this should continue to be steps forward for him.
Okay, yeah. Leading on from that, do you think he would be more likely to embrace the concepts of Starfleet and the Federation, given that his old life is now shown to be a lie?
Well, he should, but maybe he needs a counselor or somebody to sort of talk him through his feelings on it. But yeah, he should. That's, I guess, what I was thinking.
Hey, they should see if they have a holographic counselor on there.
Yeah, we could use a hologram Deanna Troi. I don't know if this falls under character development or not, but yeah. There was that moment where Zero was able to tell that Dal doubted what was happening.
Yeah.
That he wasn't feeling great about this plan.
He had some reservations.
Right. And they brought it up and they said it, but nobody did anything about it. So I would hope that this helps Zero in the future continue to speak out about it more, or maybe remind people, remember the last time this thing happened and Dal wasn't confident? I'm reading that same thing in him now. So hopefully that's a development that we get in the future, but it's not something we've seen quite yet because they still just followed him right into the fire.
Well, there would be real problems following Dal or believing Dal. He might not be lying. He might just have had the wool pulled over his eyes. In this case, I think, Zero should have spoken up and said, hey, Dal isn't sure about this. I don't think we should be taking it on face value.
Yeah. Zero isn't terribly confident, and probably because they don't yet really understand all the nuances of emotion of these different people.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Zero is developing along with all of them.
Yeah, I would say at this point, or at least up until this point, Zero is the underused character. I'd like to see a bit more from them. We saw a little bit of that last week when Zero and Gwen were talking, and Gwen tried to apologize, I guess, for what her father had done to Zero.
Yes.
But even through all that, Zero was telling Gwen, well, you're part of this new team now, and you have a new purpose.
Yeah, he was still very sympathetic to what had happened to her.
Yes, and also I feel like Zero was finding a purpose for themselves. So that, I think, was a little bit of growth there. But I'd like to see a lot more from Zero. Yeah, I think that's such an interesting character. I always like that type of character, and I think that's the character that there could be this just infinite backstory for. Mm-hmm. Sort of like when we run into the Trill. I don't think we've explored the Trill enough. I think there's something so interesting that could come out of the Trill characters. And I think the same is true here for this character.
That's an interesting observation. I like your take there.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, anything new to say about the Protostar this week?
Well, we found the transporter.
We did find the transporter, but that was pretty much it.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about how this episode worked as a kid's show and listen to our kid correspondent, Mahi.
What did you think about the episode today?
Today's episode was not to my liking because of the Ferengi. But I did like that the team worked together and returned the crystal back to the planet.
What was different about Dal this week?
Dal wasn't rude or arrogant this week, but he lied to his crew. He trusted Nandi, who wasn't trustworthy.
Will this make Dal trust people more or less?
It will be harder for Dal to trust people. He trusted Nandi as someone who cared for him, only to know later that she had sold him to the diviner. She lied to him and cheated him. She did not care about him at all. But Dal learned that he can trust his crew always.
What do you think the Prime Directive means?
Prime Directive is the Starfleet rule for all its members that they cannot harm or hurt or interfere with any other species or civilization.
What lesson did the crew learn this week?
The crew learned about the Prime Directive and First Contact. They also learned that they should not interfere with the alien species world. They learned that Nandi was not a good person.
What was your favorite part of today's episode?
My favorite part was when they transported the crystal back to the planet. Dal had intentionally left his comm badge on the crystal when he was trying to get it back from Nandi.
What did you think of the Ferengi?
I do not like the Ferengi character. She is the most mean, arrogant, selfish, lying, ill-mannered person on the show. I hope she is not in any other episode.
Thank you, Mahi.
You're welcome.
Well, not Mahi's favorite episode.
No. Well, it did feature heavily of Ferengi, and it's kind of funny how, without any external influence from you both share the same opinion.
Oh yeah, I didn't give her any influence at all, and we seem to feel the same way about the Ferengi.
There are a lot of adjectives there to explain how much she didn't like them.
Yes, I think she used all of her adjectives.
Yeah, that's quite impressive.
Yeah, that was good. It's interesting how I've been talking to other people and sort of watching the chatter on Twitter about this episode, and people talking about this being the best of all of them. And this is Mahi's least favorite episode. It's interesting. This is a little bit of a classic Trek story, where we go down to the planet, something bad happens, we escape with our lives, and we learn an important lesson. All right, thank you, Mahi. Let's go on to some feedback. We didn't get a lot of it this week, but we start with an email from John H. John H. is one of our Rebinge Deep Space Nine listeners, and he frequently contacts about that show.
Thanks for the email, John.
So he says, Happy New Year. So I really enjoyed Prodigy First Con-tact. If you're going to con, have some tact. I give it a 9 Remolite crystals out of 10. A fun, short episode with a good story and a few Easter eggs. I thought I saw a Ryzian Horgon. I'm not sure I'm saying that right. And who doesn't love tube grubs? Ask Nog. Also, 3 rules of acquisition, classic distress call, and you guessed it, we are the only ship in range, only to meet a new character with a mission, who is up to no good with a Klingon disruptor, a crazy woman in the future. Nice to see the show's Develop Lucian. Yeah, Develop Lucian was something that Dal said at one point. It was a good word, good made-up word.
Thanks again for the feedback, John.
And we did get some rules of acquisition, and I think that Ryzian Horgon was a little statue that...
Yes.
Does Dal pick it up when they get over to the Ferengi ship?
Yes, he did.
Yeah. And the tube grubs. We didn't talk about that, but there is that quick scene where the Ferengi is stuffing down some squirming worms. It's pretty gross. Very Ferengi.
Yeah, they didn't actually name them in the episode.
They did not.
But if you watch Deep Space Nine, you'll know exactly what they are.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Well, I'm glad John followed us from Deep Space Nine over here. He knows what we're talking about.
Yeah. And Brian from Talk Through Media has also given some feedback. For me, this is the best episode of the series so far, with last week being a close second. I liked how they are slowly introducing the mystery of the protostar and how we're finally seeing them find out about transporters and the Prime Directive. We found out about Dal being raised by a Ferengi, Damon Nandi, and how much Dal and Gwyn end up having in common. This is the first episode where I didn't find Dal annoying. Not even a little bit. I actually felt sorry for him being sold into servitude by his foster mum.
Aw.
All these kids have tragic stories. Anyway, the show's highly watchable. 9.2 out of 10. That's it for now. Thank you, Brian.
I agree. This was the first episode where I also did not find Dal annoying. I don't know if he'll always be this low on the annoying scale, but yeah, he was pretty good this week. Then we have Brian from Colorado who says, this was a near perfect Prodigy episode for me. I give it 9.9 out of 10 floor pies.
Yay!
I thought it was hilarious they made that Simpsons reference explicitly. The crew is becoming more of a team and adopting Starfleet values. I love the technobabble about harmonics on the planet and their evaluation of it. Seeing a clothed Ferengi female was a nice callback to DS9 and the social effects that must have happened to that society under Nog's leadership. I do wonder how she got so far in the Gamma Quadrant, if that's where they are now, and why or how she happened to bump into Dal in the vastness of space. That's the point one deduction I gave. Otherwise, this was such a great story. Oh, and we found out they do have a transporter. Yay!
Yes.
That's always the funny part, is when you just accidentally bump into someone in space. Like, you wouldn't even do that at the mall. You don't even run into people that you know, even though they might be in the same building. So that's always pretty funny when that happens.
Exactly.
And James and I did talk about Pell in the Gamma Quadrant. And so far, that's the only female Ferengi that I've seen go to the Gamma Quadrant. So I'm pretty sure that this Ferengi is a descendant.
Ah.
Or some kind of relative.
Could be. Well, one of the things about Pell, and I really did like her character, was she was actually a Ferengi who was good at business.
Right.
And like I said, the running joke is most of the Ferengi really are pretty bad at it.
Yeah.
But she kind of had a clue.
She probably could have been the Grand Nagus. She was so good at it. All right, let's talk about the Star Trekkiness of this episode.
Oh, well. Opening with a captain's log?
Yes, and doing it in a cold open?
Yes. Responding to a distress call?
Yes. Using the transporter and ending up on a ship of an alien collector who's collecting things she shouldn't be?
Yes.
That's very familiar.
Yep. And you can get more Star Trek than the Prime Directive.
No, you can't get more Star Trek than somebody explaining the Prime Directive to you.
Thank
tell you why you can't do the obvious thing.
Yes. Yes. Also very tricky. A scummy Ferengi.
Yeah, anybody who watches Star Trek knew that one was trouble.
A Klingon disruptor.
Yeah, you noticed that right away. I never pay attention to those kind of details, but also John noticed that in the feedback as well.
Yep.
Also, the crew caring about an alien race that they don't yet understand. I mean, that's really starting to become Starfleet.
Oh, completely, yes. Caring about their well-being.
Absolutely.
Tube grubs, although they did not name them specifically.
No. But it's easier to make them look real and squirmy in a cartoon
Yes.
than it is in a live action show.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so lots of Star Trekkiness in this episode.
Oh, huge
and
amount of
it seems
it.
like it was quite popular with our listeners, except for Mahi.
That's kind of fascinating because the other people were already Star Trek nerds.
Yep.
She's coming into Star Trek and she didn't like this episode. I guess maybe it's because they're just showing the first really sort of negative character that you come across.
Yep.
It's been very upbeat, if you like, to this extent. It's been very much Dickensian sort of orphan kind of feel and them escaping that environment. Whereas this one's the first time we've met really a negative character outside the mining colony.
Well, there's always going to be bad guys.
Yeah.
And there's always going to be bad guys you don't like. Gold Dukat comes to mind for me. I find him difficult to watch.
Yeah.
But doesn't make me dislike the show overall. I just don't like those particular episodes that he's in.
Well, he's one of the greatest Cardassians who ever lived.
He definitely thinks so.
Oh, sorry. In his own mind, yeah.
In his own mind. Okay, time for rating. So what is your rating? You made me go first last time, so I'll call on you first.
Loved it. 10 out of 10.
I should do your rating. I could have guessed.
Like I said, this show continues to live up to the expectations that I have for it. Over to you.
I'm thinking, I'm not sure what my rating is.
Really?
I liked this episode probably about the same as last week's,
Yeah.
and I gave last week's a 9, so I'd probably give this one a 9. This one felt maybe a little bit more like an episode that I don't need to go back to too many times. Yeah. I'm not sure I learned a lot of things, that there was something super impressive in it that I needed to watch again. The aliens were kind of cool, and the music they played, that was sort of cool. But there wasn't a lot of humor in it, and the bad guy wasn't that dynamic and interesting. It was just an annoying Ferengi.
Yeah.
So I thought the episode was great. I really liked it, and gets a thumbs up from me. But if I were going to go back and watch one episode, I would go back and watch the previous episode, with all those old characters in it. So maybe I'll give this one an 8.9999999.
Ah. I might have to go back and review and see if there were any Ferengi episodes that you actually liked. Could this be a first Ferengi episode that Kim has actually been really positive about?
Well, when the Ferengi loses, that's a good thing. But also, remember the things I don't like about the Ferengi are typically the misogynistic nature of it and how they are never called on it.
Yeah.
everybody just seems to say it's okay that they force their women to stay on the planet, never can leave their houses, can't talk to people, and can't wear clothes. Nobody says anything about it. Nobody does anything about it. In this particular case, this is a female who is out being a bad guy, just like anybody.
Yeah.
So I think that's good.
You know, Quark, if you steal stuff one more time, we're going to do something about it.
Exactly.
Which was always kind of the joke of they never did anything about it.
There was that episode, The House of Quark. I'm pretty sure I gave that a thumbs up. I did enjoy that episode.
Mostly because it was full of Klingons.
So it's not without precedent.
Yes, that's
But
true. That's true.
I do not like the Ferengi. I think we've covered that.
Yes.
All right. I think that is it for episode 7. Come back next week for episode 8. We'll see what's happening next week.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, I want to let you know that James and I can always be reached on RebingeIt@gmail.com and also on Twitter and Instagram @RebingeIt.
And don't forget, you can listen to our Deep Space Nine podcast called Rebinge Deep Space Nine, available everywhere you get your podcasts and on YouTube @RebingeIt.
To contact us for Prodigy and even be a part of the show if you'd like, you can join the Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/Star Trek TTM podcasts with an S at the end. You can also leave audio and written feedback at talkthroughmedia.com/feedback, or you can simply email us at rebingeit@gmail.com. So lots of ways to get to us if you want to be part of this podcast.
So hit those keys, people.
Or as I always like to say on the other podcast, or if you just want to say something nice.
That's it for this week. Come back next week to hear the Rebinge It crew take on a new episode of Star Trek Prodigy.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.